All right, test, test. All right, we're good. All right, welcome everyone. This is intro to backend. Make sure it's not intro to iOS or Android or DPD or anything else. So yeah, let's get started. So first, some course logistics. So again, this is intro to backend. This is the section code over there. Make sure you've enrolled in the right section because every year we get a few kids that enroll in the wrong classes and stuff. So yeah. And I assume all of you have passed the pre-test and filled out the Google form. If you haven't filled out the Google form for registration, please do so. So then we can add you to CMSX and all of that later in the week. And then yeah, just enroll in Student Center if you haven't already. And make sure you're on the ed discussion. If you're not, just send us an email on the courses email and we'll add you pretty soon. So yeah, so this class is going to be hosted on Monday, Wednesday. So we're starting it on Wednesday, but usually we want lectures to be on Monday and demos to be on Wednesday. And so we're going to, I guess, rotate between lecture and demo days. And at the end of every class, we're going to have a Kahoot to record attendance. And if for some reason you can't make it, like you have a prelim or you got sick, all the recordings of the lectures will be posted on the YouTube channel. So you won't be able to fall behind or anything like that. So then for the assignments, we're going to have weekly assignments in this class. They're going to be released on Monday. So I think PA1 will be released next Monday. And then it's going to be due the following Monday, except for PA1. I believe PA1's due on the 25th, if I'm not mistaken. So you guys will have a little bit of time to do that. We have 6 total slip days in the class, and you can only use up to 3 slip days on a single assignment. And then after that, you have -1 penalty per day after slip days run out. So assignments are 10 points. So if you use like an extra slip down an assignment, you can maximum get a 90%. So yeah, it's pretty lenient. And then this is the grading scheme for the class. We've got the 6 assignments that are worth 60 points. The final project, which is Hack Challenge, that's going to be around 30 points. The weekly surveys and attendance are each 5 worth. So that's going to be 10. And then the total is going to be 100. And then since this is a pass-fail class, you need to get a 70 in order to pass. We don't want anyone to fail. We try to get everyone to pass every year. So yeah. And then, yeah, so attendance is 5% of your grade. And historically, not a lot of people kind of show up at the end. So to make that, I guess, to prevent that problem, we're going to have prizes at the end of the semester. So the top 3 people that do well in the Kahoot, they're going to get some prizes as shown up here. Yeah, I think in the previous semesters, it was some Lego toy. I don't really know what that is, but I remember last year we got like a stuffed Bowser or something for the winner. So if you want something cool at the end, make sure to come to class. And then, yeah, so the textbook, this is really useful for the assignments and just, getting to know the course in general. It has all the information you need. It has what dates the assignments are due, what topics we're going to cover in the class. And yeah. So then the next thing is academic dishonesty. So this is a Cornell course. So there's a 0 tolerance policy if we catch y'all cheating. I assume that, y'all know it, what is and is not cheating. You can work with others like on assignments, but don't just be copy and pasting blatant code. Yeah. And then if we do find out about an AI violation, we're going to have to contact Walker White, and he's not a person that you're going to want to talk to. So take it from me, you don't want an AI violation. So yeah. So then, yeah, so this is going to be the course overview. So the first 4 weeks are going to be routes, databases, relational databases, and abstractions. And these are the main core concepts for like setting up a database and creating your own backend. And then the next 2 topics are containerization, DevOps, and deployment. This is how you're going to allow your others to use your backend in a sense. And then the last 2 weeks is going to be Hack Challenge, which I'll talk more about later. And then the last, I guess, optional topic will be images. So you'll be able to, I guess, upload images to the cloud and have other people see your images. So yeah, so these are the instructors. My name's Tony. I'm a sophomore in the College of Engineering studying CS and ORI. I'm originally from Gainesville, Florida. And a fun fact about me is that I like running a lot.
Hey everyone, my name's Ayush. I'm a sophomore studying CS in the College of Arts and Sciences. I'm originally from Edison, New Jersey. And a fun fact about me is I broke my foot playing tag. So
yeah. Okay, yeah, so let's begin. If we're going over something too fast, don't hesitate to like raise your hand and ask questions. We'd be happy to answer them. So yeah. So the first thing we're going to cover is the client server model. So as a first question, does anyone know what that is already? Raise your hand if you do. Okay, that's totally cool. So basically, the client server model is basically the user interacting with the server and then the server then giving user back information, right? So the client is essentially any computer, like a phone, laptop, tablet, that is running your code locally. And then this essentially interacts with the front end of your application. So the front end, which is the things that the user sees and interacts with, which is like literal text images, like the like button on Instagram, like the little buttons that you can interact with, that's all the front end. And so displaying content and handling user interactions, like viewing something, that's all front end work. So then the server is also just like a computer. And you can think of it as like a huge mega computer that runs backend code and that handles all the data of an application. So it's basically like a much larger, much more powerful computer and handles all the data and the centralized access to information. So like, let's say you're on YouTube, right? All the YouTube videos and links, all of that information, it isn't stored on your phone. It's instead stored on the server. And then the server communicates with you, the client, to then provide that information to allow you to like watch your video or click that particular link. And this is why you need Wi-Fi to access things like YouTube, because not everything is stored in your computer, right? If you try to store all of YouTube on your computer, that's going to take up all your memory and bad things will happen. So this is why, we need servers and clients and all that. So then, yeah, so we're going to talk about client server communication and how the client communicates with the server and how the server sends back stuff to the client. So let's consider Google, right? So we have google.com, which is the domain name, and it's linked to an IP address, which is basically just a bunch of letters and numbers that identify a specific domain. Okay, yeah. Yeah, so Google is the domain name. The domain is not equal to the server name. They're totally two totally different things. And these domain names are translated into IP addresses. And then, so what this basically does is that you have, I guess, the computer, the client is sending, I guess, where is google.com to the DNS. And then the DNS, what that basically does is it translates your, I guess, search into an IP address, and then it sends the IP address back to the client. And then now, since the client has the IP address, you can send or you can query information from the google.com server over there with the IP address. All right. So yeah, the next things are requests. So requests are things that are initiated by the client. And again, the client is a user, which is like a phone, tablet, or other things that are used by the user. So the request is a network call over the internet. Suppose you want to look at some video or you want to view text or post something. All those things, you need to request that information. So the URL is used to indicate the request destination of like where you're trying to go or what you're trying to receive. And then the method indicates like the operation purpose. And we're going to cover methods a little bit later on. And then the body of the request contains additional data from the client. So like if you're trying to log into something, you're going to have a username and a password in like a request body, which we'll talk about later. All right. So the request URL, it indicates the request destination, and it's also called the endpoint. And these two terms are kind of used interchangeably. It defines the specific route path to hit. A good visualization of a route path is like, if you think of it as like a function, kind of like has an input, tells you an output, kind of like tells you where to go. So that's essentially like what the route path does. And so you can integrate data into the URL. So information is already encoded into that path. And a part of this is query parameters, which we'll see in a minute. Oh, yeah, so there's four main archetypes of operations, and we have a little fun acronym over here to help you remember them. It's called CRUD. So you've got create, retrieve, update, and delete. And this acronym can be used to remember the purposes of these different methods. So like with creating, you're trying to create something. If you're retrieving, you're trying to get something from a server. If you're updating, you're trying to update some data that you already have in your backend. And then deleting, you're trying to delete some data that you don't want in your database. So, and then these are the methods that kind of correspond to these different, I guess, CRUD operations. So a post method is like information retrieval. So you're trying to send something to the server, and this is information transmission. And this corresponds to the create type of operation, because you're trying to create some data with a post method. And then the retrieve corresponds to a get method. So you're trying to like retrieve something from a database. So let's say I want to see someone's user profile, like, right? I'm going to be sending a get request because I'm trying to see some data that's already in the database, right? And then the next thing is a put method. And this is essentially corresponding to the update in CRUD. And you're trying to revise some information, right? So let's say I want to update my username in Instagram. I'll send like my updated username like through a put request. And then there's going to be some operation on the back end that changes it. And then lastly is the delete method. That's basically if I want to delete my account on Instagram or something, I'll send a delete request, and then my account will be deleted on Instagram. And then there are some other types of request methods, but we'll be mainly focusing on these four in this class. So it's going to be post, get, put, and delete. And yeah, so RESTful APIs all conform to these methods, and REST API are an essential type of database that also conform and use these four methods. So the next, So the next thing is the request body, and these are standardized forms of data. And I'm sure everyone has heard of stuff like HTML, JSON, or plain text. And so in this class, we're going to be using the JSON form. So the request body essentially contains information necessary for the desired operation. So like if I want to log into Instagram, I'm going to have like a username and then a password for login. And then if I want to post like a profile picture to my Instagram, that request body is going to contain like the image data that I want to like have on my profile picture. And yeah. So now we're going to look at some example requests. So here we have a get request, and this is www.google.com, and then we're searching for something. And so this is a get request, right? And Google is the domain name. And then /search is like the root path. So this is essentially hitting like a search endpoint. And then you're going to be querying like the search by, I guess, these key value pairs. So if you look at this, that Q over there, it corresponds to a key. And then the query over there corresponds to a value. So if you're familiar with like hash maps in Java or like dictionaries in Python, that's basically like a key value pair that you're using when you're doing this particular get request. And then next, we're doing a post request. Let's say we want to log into Google, right? So /login is the root path, and the request body is in JSON form over here. And we see that we have a username, which is GS123, and then a not so good password, just password. So yeah, and then an important thing to note is that you have to have all of your, I guess, request bodies with double quotes. In Python, strings can be single quotes, but in JSON, they have to be in double quotes, or else they're going to cause a lot of errors. So make sure you have double quotes on your request bodies. Yeah. Okay. So the next thing is a response. So the response is triggered by your client request. So your client, like the client is going to ask for something. So I'm going to send, let's say I send a get request to a server, and then the server is going to respond to me. It's going to give me some sort of data, right? If it exists, right? So it's triggered by the client request again, and it returns confirmation of like the requested operation. So there's many different kind of response, I guess, codes that you can receive. So I'm sure everyone has encountered like a 404 error, right? It's when something is not found. And so that response code corresponds to some data not being found when you're, I guess, getting something. And yeah, so it sends meaningful data in a body just like a request. So like if you receive 404, you know, the thing that you're searching for is not found. And then, yeah, so the response codes, as I mentioned before, they kind of indicate the status of your requested source. So in general, like anything that starts with a 2 means that your operation has been successful. So like 200 would be okay for like getting stuff. When you're like creating data, I think the good response code is 201. And then all the 400 response codes are kind of like errors, but I think on the client side. So like 404 is like not found. So whatever you're searching for is not found. And then if you get a 500 response code, that means that something's really wrong in your backend. So yeah. So now we're going to look at some example response codes. So this first one over here, we have that, I guess, somewhere get request, right? And so Yeah, so say you queried like 100 of something, right? And the count is 100, and then this will contain the information that you're trying to get. But then this has a status code of 200, and then this means that your request was indeed successful. So then the next one we're going to look at is a post request. And so we're trying to log into Google, right? So we put in the right username, we put in the right password, and we see that we have a success is true, and we have some data that is returned to us after we add a successful login. And we see that the success response code of 200 is good. But then let's say we supplied some wrong info, maybe I forgot my password or whatever, and we return a response code of 401. That means that we weren't successful, and there's probably some error within the body that will, I guess, tell us what's wrong. And yeah, so in summary, we have clients and servers. Clients, again, are what you're using to, I guess, send requests. So like a laptop, a phone. Yeah. And then the server is like a big mega computer that stores your data and that the client is interacting with. So the client sends a request to the server. Again, there's 4 types: CRUD, create, retrieve, update, delete. And then once the request hits the server, a route is triggered. So like the route path determines what route is triggered. You have some sort of data operation. So like, let's say I had a bad Uber experience and I'm sending like a 3-star report, or yeah, a 3-star report, I guess, to Uber, right? So let's say this driver's average star rating was 5. So now that I sent a 3, there's gonna be some data operation to reduce the driver's like average star rating. And so that's going to happen. And then there's going to be a return response from the stuff that I just sent. And that's going to be sent back over to the client. And so I know I just went over a bunch of stuff here. If anyone has questions, feel free to ask away. All right, cool. Yeah, so next is the pre-demo knowledge check. So first, documentation is gonna be super important in this course. I know it's gonna be part of like your final project. And it's really important for you and also for others to understand your code, because for the final project, you'll be working with others. And if they don't know, what's going on with your code, then that's not really good. So yeah, so with this function, right, we're returning the task with an ID, task ID, right? With like, if we didn't have this, I guess, comment down here, we wouldn't really know what we're getting, right? We could be getting some task ID, we could be getting the data of the actual task. We don't really know what's going to be returned. So this is why it's useful to, I guess, have documentation. But that being said, you want to avoid commenting code that's like self-explanatory and not necessary, right? So if you have this like data loaded thing over here, right, and it says false, I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory about what that means, right? It means if the data is loaded. So you don't need to comment that for documentation. And this is like a good acronym for it, right? So if you see a stop sign, you don't really comment this is a stop sign. So, and then, so the next thing is debugging. So we're going to be using Postman this semester to help debug your code. So what Postman essentially does is it allows you to send requests to a backend, and it's really useful for determining which routes are buggy and stuff like that. So this is really going to be useful for your assignments, and I think it's going to be required when you do your assignments. So, and then the last thing are virtual environments. And virtual environments, they essentially create an isolated Python environment for projects. So different projects might require different frameworks that you're using and like different libraries and dependencies, which are, I guess, essential tools that you use alongside your code. And they contain packages of specified versions and are useful when working on multiple projects. So like, let's say you're working on one project that uses like Flask 2.0 or something, and then you're working on another project that uses Flask 1.0. If you're using the same environment to like run both projects, then you're going to encounter some errors because there's obviously some updates to the 2.0 version that might not be compatible with the 1.0 version. So it's very important that you have specific environments for each of your like assignments and just coding stuff in general, and make sure that you activate and deactivate them each time so that the stuff that you install on these environments is solely for that project, and you don't install it like globally on your computer, because that can mess some stuff up too. And so, yeah, these are the action items for, I guess, this weekend. So join the ed discussion by Saturday. The link should be on the course textbook. And then, yeah, link on CMSX. We'll be adding you guys to CMS really soon. And then, yeah, if you're not added to CMS by the end of the weekend, that probably means you didn't fill out the Google form. So if you haven't done that, please do so. And then if you haven't been added for whatever reason, just email the courses email. And yeah, it's gonna be a fun semester. So then yeah, on to the demo.
So, hey everyone, that concludes our lecture part of the class. The lecture is more so going to be like big, like broad level topics. And the demo is going to be more concrete about us actually implementing the topics in code. So before we start with the demo, I just want to show you guys the course textbook. So let me just open a new Chrome tab. And usually with demos, you guys can just follow along. So to find the textbook, you just type in Cornell Intro to Backend. First one here. And then you can kind of scroll down to see course textbook down here. And this is going to be basically your guide for everything in the course, including assignments, extra materials to study. And of course, these lectures are going to be posted on YouTube, so you can always watch them there. But yeah, here's the introduction, syllabus, whatever. We're going to come down to roots just to start with the demo. And usually between or before a class, we'd have some pre-class to-dos for each of these classes that we have. So today, since we're covering roots, we'll click on the pre-class to-dos. And these are basically all the stuff that we want you guys to do before we come to class, just to speed up the time it takes. So obviously we can download Postman. You don't have to have it downloaded for this class right now, but have it downloaded in the future just so we can continue. And then I'm going to assume everyone has Python downloaded. If you don't have Python downloaded and you need help installing it, just come see us after class and we can help you with that. A way to check if you have it downloaded is if you open up your terminal, which is a little shortcut to see it on Mac at least, is Command Space. You can type in any application name. So I'm going to type in terminal here. The equivalent on Windows is going to be either PowerShell, Windows PowerShell, or command prompt. Basically, if I make this bigger, you can see here, this is my terminal. And just a quick check to see if I have Python is going to be Python 3 -- version. Sometimes it'll just be Python -- version. So see that like when I type Python 3, it's going to be interchangeable depending on your system. So if Python 3 doesn't work, just try Python. And if that doesn't work, then you don't have Python installed. So coming back to the source code, we have some demo starter code to download. So I'll just click on that to download that. And then I'm going to be covering first off the terminal, which is a tool that helps us develop like applications and backends much faster. And then we'll go into the actual demo starter code and we'll explain how an actual backend works. So starting off with the terminal, there's a couple commands we can use. So you just saw clear, that'll just clear the screen, making it more readable. Some basic ones, there's pwd, which is print working directory. Basically, what it means is you can see that I'm currently at the users / my name directory. In other words, a directory is basically just a folder in your operating system. So as most of you know, your OS, either it be Windows or Mac, organizes your files in folders. And within those folders, you can access files. There may be even more folders within it. So this is just an easy way to check which folder you're in, basically. Another command would be ls, which is short for list. That lists all the current directories in your current directory. So the subfolders within the current folder. So typing ls here lists all the folders in my users / username 3 folder. And then since we want to navigate through these directories, we can type cd, which literally means change directory. And we can either go into one of these. So I can see like cd into desktop. And now I'm in the desktop directory. If I type print working directory, we can see that this is updated to desktop. And then if we want to go back up a level, so back to a username 3, we can just do cd and then -- which basically just brings us up a level. So those are some basic commands. What I'm going to do now is we all downloaded the starter code from the website. And usually when you download something from the web, it stores it in something called a downloads folder. If I list out all the directories now, you can see the downloads folder here. So we can cd into that and we can move that anywhere we want. right now I'm gonna move it from my downloads folder to my desktop folder. So the first thing I would do is CD into downloads. And to autocomplete, you can hit tab and it'll just fill in the most likely directory. Hit ls, you can see all of my directories here, but the main one that we are like concerned about is the source.zip. So we can move that to move source.zip. Move takes in basically two arguments, takes in the file you want to move and then the destination to it. So if you're remember from before, we can move it back a directory using this command, the // And now if we list, we can see that the source zip is no longer there. And then if we change directory back, and then let me clear that, you can see source.zip is now moved up a directory. So now I just want to move this into my desktop. So move source.zip into desktop. And then I can actually check my desktop now. And we can see source.zip is now here. If any of you guys know about compression, you know .zip is basically a compressed file. So we can open that up and that'll unpack it and basically give us this folder. We can delete the zip file after that and then come back here. So let me go back to my desktop and we can see, I mean, that's my resume, but there's a source directory now. And now we want to go into something called an IDE, which is short for Integrated Development Environment. If you guys have taken CS 1110, I'm pretty sure they make you install Sublime. I'm going to be using VS Code, which is just another like simple code editor, but any IDE you have installed should work. And also it's on the website if you guys don't have one already. So a quick shortcut for, first you want to change directory into the source directory, and a quick shortcut for VS Code only is literally just the command code. And then remember how before when we change directories, we use periods and slashes. Right now, we're just going to use one period, which stands for the current working directory. So I were to hit enter for that, it'll open up this directory inside VS Code. So you can see it opens up source and then the contents within it. But if that command doesn't work for you guys, I'll just do it manually. Come here. We can use the command space just to open up this search bar again. For any application, you can just type in the name and get it. So VS Code or Visual Studio Code. If you're using Sublime, you can just type in Sublime there. And then it'll open up this for me, at least. Sublime, I'm sure you guys covered it in class how to use that. And then basically, I come up here. For Windows, it's going to be a very similar thing. Open folder. And then go to desktops and then source. And then open up that. Everyone good so far? If you have any questions, just raise your hand and we can deal with those. Yeah, so right now we use our terminal to basically open up the code that we want to work with. And so another cool thing about VS Code and Sublime as well, they have an integrated terminal inside the actual thing. So you can just open up a new terminal and this will function exactly the same as I showed you before. So you can type in pwd, shows you current working directory, you can type in ls, and it shows all those. So now that we have a terminal, if you remember from before in lecture, Tony mentioned something called a virtual environment, which if you guys don't know, to make it more simplistic, is basically Python inside Python, if that makes sense. So you have your base installation of Python, right? That's the same one that I type in when I type in Python 3 -- version, it shows that I have this Python installed locally in my computer. And now when I create a new virtual environment, it's basically creating like a subspace. It's basically like creating a subspace where you can basically change anything inside that little subspace and it won't affect the outside system. So to do that, we simply type Python 3 or Python interchangeable, depending on what you're actually running. You do -m, which stands for module. It's a module flag. You don't really have to deal with that anyway, but and then we type in venv, which is short for virtual environment. Basically, we're creating a virtual environment inside Python. And then we want to put the name of the actual virtual environment. Usually it's standard just to type like venv, so we know the virtual environment is venv, but I could type anything here and make my name or like backend, and it'll work exactly the same. I'm just going to use venv for the sake of this class though. Right. And now when you come up here, you should see a little venv in your directory as well. Everybody good so far? Okay. So now a little bit touching more on like the environment, the actual virtual environment. The reason we do this is to install like packages, which are basically like other people's code that we want to use in our project. So we install those packages into our virtual environment, and then we can use everything in that virtual environment and run our code like that. And the reason we want to use that is because we don't want other people's code interfering with our base Python installation. So the first, we created the virtual environment. Now we have to activate it so we can actually like use it. So on Mac, it's going to be ven period, which stands for current working directory, right? And then venv, which is the name of the folder we just created. And then bin, which is short for binaries, which you won't really have to get into. And then activate. So if you're on Mac, just hit enter there. Windows, it's a little bit different. So on Windows, it's going to be venv /venv scripts activate, and it'll do the exact same thing. These should be backslashes instead of forward slashes, but it'll do the same thing. So right now I'm going to activate my virtual environment. So, and the thing now that it's activated, you can see little venv like prefix before my current directory. So that's how you'll know it's activated. And then as I was saying before, we want to use other people's code in our project. So first we have to get that code and like download it into our current virtual environment. And to run that, we do pip3. Pip is basically Python's installing program. So pip3 and then install, which is the actual command we want to run. Then you want to do the -r flag, which means recursively, which means, so if I didn't include this -r and I went to install something, it would only install one of them. So we want to do -r to install all the files associated with that package. And then a cool feature that pip has is that we can read directly from a requirements file. So requirements are basically just the names of the packages that we want to import. And here we have click, we have Flask, which is what we're going to be using for this course. And then a lot of other ones that are part of Flask. So pip3 install -r requirements .txt. Again, same with Python 3. Pip3 could also be replaced with pip. It just depends on if you have Python 3 and previous versions or just Python 3 installed on your computer. Everybody caught up? And if you have any questions or you're stuck on something, just come see us after class. We'll help you out. So yeah, now we have everything installed in our virtual environment. We have all these requirements. And then now we can actually run our backend application. So if you see app.py, that's just a sample code, like app.py. So let's run that. Python 3 app.py. If you remember from CS 1110, that's exactly how you run a Python file, right? So we run that file and we see a couple of things. We see serving Flask app, which basically means, if you remember, servers serve an app to the user. So right now we're serving this app called app.py. We have debug mode on. This is a development server. And then a lot of things here. But the main thing to see is that it's running on this HTTP, like this address, right? So if we were to go to that address right now, we can command click straight from here. It'll take us there. And then we see over here, hello world, right? If we go back to our code here, we have a simple Flask app. So just running through it. From Flask, we import Flask. That's basically what we covered before with the installing the requirements. If we go back to the requirements file, we install Flask right here. So that's how we can import it like that. Now in the app.py, this is just like to use the Flask app. This is like some complicated syntax that it doesn't really like matter too much that you know the meaning of, but the gist of it is that the app object is going to be using our backend service. So that's basically like, it's basically when you run the app, you're going to be using like, if you remember from 1110, when you do something like Flask and then open parentheses, that's going to use the constructor. So we're creating a new Flask object using dunder name dunder, which is a special thing for Python files that we'll get to down here. But basically, we're creating a new app, and then we're saying at that root that we covered. So if you remember from what Tony covered before, the roots, how like google.com/login would be an example of a root. Right here, we just have the slash. So when you're running something locally, it always runs on something called localhost. So if I come back here, you can do 127, this is your that, or you can type in localhost right here. It's exactly the same thing. Localhost running at port 8000. Again, those are those semantic things you don't really need to worry about. But basically, we see that at this root, at the slash root, is what the function is going to be returning. So right now, we defined a function just called hello, and we're going to return hello world. So that's why we see hello world right here. And then coming down here, so touching more on the dunder name dunder. So this is basically, it's an intrinsic property of a Python file. So basically every Python file has this property, which is just the name. And then we check if we're running this. Basically, if this file is running, then we run this. And then as we said before, we created a new object of app up here as a Flask object. And then we're just calling the run method on it. And we want it to run at this host. So if I come back here, again, localhost, that previous 127.0.0.1, and this will all be serving the same exact thing. They're all just interchangeable. And then we want it to run at port 8000. So if we come back here in the URL, port 8000, when you use a colon like that, it'll specify the port. And we want it to run on debug true. So coming back here, it says debug mode on, and this is development server. So yeah, that's everything we'll cover today in the demo, in the app.py file. If you guys have any questions or you have difficulty installing Python or anything like that, just see us after class. But now we'll go into the Kahoot.